I'm Amanda Cavaleri, work with the Bitcoin Today Coalition. It's a C4 that we founded. We have a couple board members and an advisor up here, so you'll hear a little bit about that. And I'm really grateful for everyone who's here in the audience especially, and I hope we can be interesting for you today. And I think at the end we'll have like Q&A, so if there's any thoughts or whatever, we would love to hear it all. This is an open source forum, so we're all here to do good work. So we'll just go down the line, and folks will just take about 10 seconds with their name and what they're working on.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Schneps. I am Director of Public Policy at Foundry, and I am coming here from New York.
Dennis Porter, CEO, co-founder of Satoshi Action Fund. Excited to be up on this panel today with a couple of my advisory members as well, and good friends. Happy to talk about this interesting topic with you guys today.
Hi, Meg's Gronowska. I currently advise PRTI. We do some pretty cool stuff where we take waste tires and use that to mine Bitcoin. And before Bitcoin, I worked on economic development, low carbon energy transition, and energy markets and government.
Hey everyone, Jayson Browder. Consider myself a national security expert. More recently into Bitcoin. I'm on the board of directors of Bitcoin Today Coalition, and then helped with Kyle and Alex found BTC Vets, Veterans Energy Technology, to support Bitcoin adoption. Super excited to be here.
Good morning, Miami. Justin Orkney. I've been in the electric utility industry for the last 8.5 years, focused on demand response, renewable energy integration, customer programs, rate design, regulatory process, and been focused on Bitcoin mining the last 1.5 years. So really excited to be up here on the advisory council with Dennis and Satoshi Action Fund, and looking forward to the conversation.
I'm Perianne Boring. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Chamber of Digital Commerce. This month we are celebrating our 8th birthday. We were established 8 years ago to be a dedicated organization for the digital asset and the blockchain technology ecosystem. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we spend the majority of our time and focus on educating our policymakers on the importance of this technology. We have a mining initiative, so we do represent a number of different mining entities trying to combat all the propaganda that we all know is untrue about energy policy issues related to digital assets, and specifically proof-of-work blockchains.
Hello. If you were on the previous panel, sorry for, you're going to have to listen to me drone on for one more time. Alex Brammer, I am the head of digital strategy at Talen Energy. Most relevant to this panel, I'm on the board of directors of the Bitcoin Today Coalition with Amanda and Jayson, work on BTC Vets with Kyle and Jayson, doing just sensible Bitcoin-focused policy advocacy primarily at the federal level. Kyle, Jayson, and I focus kind of on the national security and energy security angle, and I'm excited to have this conversation this morning.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and jump in. I think Stephen mentioned the order of operations, so we'll start with state, federal, geopolitical, and probably ESG. What's coming down the pipeline with that will trickle in as well. So we'll go ahead and get started with state. I think, one of the most interesting battles recently has been New York State, and that's something that Kyle can really speak to. So would love to dig into that, and then some other things that folks are seeing on the state level.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. As you all may have heard, New York has been pushing a 2-year moratorium, a sort of Bitcoin ban on mining for the past couple years, and they've managed to pass it through the legislature recently. Foundry and DCG have been very involved in combating this, mainly due to the fact that it risks a sort of domino effect among other blue states and further partisanship just in general about our issue, which is something that we don't really want to see happening. There are certain takeaways I think that I wanted to mention that may be able to be communicated and applied anywhere. And the first is, I would urge members of the industry to really be proactive as opposed to reactionary in terms of your engagement in public policy. For the first reason that you're going to be better positioned, the second reason, in the long run, it's going to be cheaper. And so if you are chasing a bill that has come out, and you're operating and a bill comes out, and now you're scrambling to try to fight this bill, you're going to end up hiring lobbyists who don't really, are not completely focused on you. They have lots of other clients. You're going to pay exorbitant fees to lobbyists and law firms and things like that. So I would definitely recommend, having somebody on your staff that is paying attention to this. If you can't hire, somebody who's working public policy, then go through trade associations that have this industry in mind, or talk to other companies that you may be working with and see if they have somebody that's focusing on this, and see if there's a partnership, because you don't want to be reliant upon lobbyists that are utilizing their own connections and preserving those relationships over what your goals are. And that's what a lobbyist will do who has many different clients. So that's one of the first takeaways that I'll mention on the state level. Really try to be proactive and prepare, and don't be reactionary.
Yeah, I love that. I think one thing that I found is when you can actually meet state senators and representatives and economic development folks and teach them and give them the tools to understand this, it really goes a long way. I saw Perianne had a thought.
We've had a team on the ground in Albany for a couple of years now, and we've worked alongside other groups like Foundry and others who have tried to prevent this bill from becoming law. Just where it is today, so it passed the Assembly, it passed the Senate, and it's currently on Governor Hochul's desk. At this point, she has until the end of the year to sign it into law or to veto it. So at this point, no news is good news. We're hoping she does not sign it into law. She has another approach she can take. So we did work with the industry to draft an alternative bill. It's a study bill. And instead of putting into effect this draconian moratorium, the state of New York could also do a study on digital assets to help inform policy. This is another way that she can show that she is taking action on an issue that many members of the state have legitimate concerns about. But first, let's learn what the concerns are before we start putting in policies that are going to impact businesses. I will say both in the Assembly, which is like the House for the state, and then in the Senate of the legislature, they had to pull out the most insane political moves to get this bill passed through the committees to the floor for a vote. So, for example, in the Assembly, where it passed first, a bill first has to pass out of committee, and then it can go to the floor for a full vote, and then it goes to the other chamber. So on the House side or the Assembly side, the day that it was to come up for a vote in the committee, we had worked all year educating different members of the committee, knowing that it was going to be very partisan. At the last minute, they opened up the session and they said, we added a new member to this committee and we now have the votes, and they were able to pass it. And our team, that's a group of people from the state of New York who have been working in public policy for their entire careers in the state of New York, they had never seen that move be made. But it just shows how much of an impact all the education had made. And then we kind of saw similar stuff on the Senate side too.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. So New York, to get it passed, they had to switch committees, and then they had to, add someone to that committee to tip it, to have the tipping point. I think we'll keep moving a little bit faster in our responses too, and do like improv style to keep you all awake. So I know Alex and Justin, a lot of people have thoughts. So just hop in like popcorn style.
Yeah, just to follow up on something that Kyle said, the being proactive through engagement does not mean you hire a public policy professional necessarily. There's a lot of folks in the industry that don't need that, nor does it make sense for their business model. That's where the trade associations come in, because we're all doing this stuff. We've got Chamber of Digital Commerce, Satoshi Action Fund, Bitcoin Today Coalition, Bitcoin Vets, all trade associations, various forms and structures that are trying to do this and trying to get out ahead of this. Our wonderful sponsors of this panel asked us to make this applicable to folks that would be listening to the panel. How do we protect ourselves as miners and protect our equities as miners? It's through proactive engagement, just as Kyle said. And we are all kind of sitting up here trying to arm public policymakers with the information they need to see this industry as the healthy thing that it is. What we need from you is we need data and we need engagement. So just very much want to reinforce what Kyle was saying.
Just real quickly, show of hands, who's contacted like a state house or state senate member recently? Fuck yeah. That's great. I think a lot of people just, they're like, I don't like politics. I don't want to be involved with it. Like, just leave me alone and let me like run my business and, have impact, make money. I think it's very easy to get in touch. I've worked for a state house member and on the federal level for a senator. And these individuals listen to what their constituents say. And you'd be surprised when we'd get constituent calls or constituent mails, the senator or state house member would do a tally at the end of the day. And like AARP, I think, Amanda, you've worked for them, they're an incredible lobbying organization. If a member would get like 7 letters in one day about like one issue, it was like a huge deal. They were like, what the hell's going on? Like, who can we contact to figure this out? And so like I would encourage you to reach out, because you can have impact, and it's better to be proactive with that impact than, as Kyle mentioned, reactive, because other organizations are on the other side, pushing a narrative that's going to be harmful for you all.
Yeah, just to jump in here, a lot of great points so far with regards to being proactive. Some of you have contacted your local officials. I would encourage you to continue that effort and start talking to your local legislators, start talking to people that can have an impact on your bottom line, on your business, because we have a real opportunity here to go on the offense for Bitcoin mining. Right now, the majority of efforts so far have been defense, because as a relatively small industry, we don't have a lot of resources, and we are being attacked by some of the most powerful people on the entire planet, right? So I encourage all of you to take another look at how we're approaching this subject. Instead of just reacting, as they've said, being on defense, it's time that we go score some points of our own. And what I mean by that is we need to start having these conversations as early as possible with folks on the ground in the various states, regions, provinces. Satoshi Action Fund is North America centric, right? So we focus on the United States and Canada as well. And we're having conversations with folks and saying, you know what? Bitcoin mining, it brings jobs. It brings investment. It brings innovation in energy. It brings grid stability. And if you like renewables, it helps with those too. And when they hear those words, their ears perk up. They stop asking, what is Bitcoin? When they hear infrastructure, innovation, investment, they love those words. So I would encourage you to use those words when you're talking to your local elected officials. And when their ears do perk up, have them get in contact with us, Satoshi Action Fund, or any of the other organizations or folks up here that are doing the hard work of trying to make sure that this industry can survive and thrive in the United States.
Yeah, that was a great segue, Dennis. Okay, new poll for the audience. Who here has provided public comment to their Electric Utility Commission? All right, there you go. Perfect. So from my perspective, I see this as a really, really big opportunity for our industry, your industry, to get on the offensive, to be proactive. In my experience dealing with rooftop solar, there's not a conversation that can happen at the commission that has anything to do with rooftop solar, whether it's interconnections, rate designs, incentive programs, anything. They are there. They are making noise. They're bussing in 200 people for public comment. They're behind closed doors talking to the commissioners, and it's been going on for a couple decades now. And I just see this as a real big opportunity for the mining industry because like Dennis mentioned, the facts are on our side, right? We've got the physics, we've got the economics with the grid reliability once we start really getting serious about integrating it into the electric grid. So I'm pretty excited about that. And yeah, start looking at figuring out who your electric commissioners are and what their goals are, and we'll be looking to get on the ground
I love
there
the
too.
comment that the facts are on your side. I say that all the time, and I feel like so much of the challenges that the Bitcoin mining industry faces has to do with misinformation and lack of information. But when someone takes the time to understand how this technology works, how it is helping lead investments into renewable energy sources around the country and around the world, people can turn. So this is a really rewarding issue as an advocate, as a lobbyist, to get to work on, because with a short amount of education, you really can see a lot of progress.
So what I think is really special about this industry is we're one of the few, if not only, industries where we have this digital footprint, but a physical footprint, like an actual structure, and we're using energy. And that is really unique because we're bringing both like the knowledge economy jobs, but traditional energy jobs, and this industry is permeating into almost every single sector, whether that's agriculture in terms of methane reduction because they're using biodigesters to mine, whether that's flare gas or methane landfill gas reduction in CH4. So there's all these public policy issues that can be solved or helped because of Bitcoin mining. We're reducing landfill waste, like Landfill Tires, the company that I'm working with. And these, again, so Bitcoin is subsidizing or funding industries that have been historically underinvested in, whether that's grid reliability and just updating our energy grids into smart energy systems, whether that's landfill waste and all sorts of infrastructure related to that. But the whole point is that when you ban Bitcoin mining, because it's permeated all these sectors, both heavy industry and district heating, we're seeing really cool projects where miners are providing heat to, for example, the city of Vancouver, but it's also happening in areas in Europe. So we're providing energy security solutions there. And because there are solutions, I think it's important to what the panelists said is to tell these local stories. So if you have a project that's, for example, doing landfill gas capture or reducing waste tires or reducing methane from the oil fields, it's key to get these stories across to your local representative, because I used to work on the other side for economic development, and we would love to tell these stories, to talk about the innovation happening in our area and the jobs that were created. And it is so many different jobs. We've got energy specialists, we've got tradespeople, and I think that's the part, people say, oh, it's only 100 people for, or 60 people for 100 megawatts. It's much more than that, because it's supporting a whole Bitcoin industry that's not just mining. It's providing security to the whole network, and again, integrating into other sectors. So I think we need to keep that in mind as part of that education process.
Yeah, I love that, Mags. So I think on the state level, moral of the story is if you're mining somewhere or you live somewhere, go teach. I think that's the biggest thing you can do. And if we're not teaching, then that's kind of on us when these bad policies come through, because there are other people on the other side that are pushing. I mean, I think at the state level, maybe it was Chris Larson or Ripple could have been behind some of the funding theoretically. I don't know. We can all do our own research there. But this is happening, right? So we're seeing these folks that have been, and we'll kind of move into the national panel, the national section next, but I'll just give you an example, right? Like, I live in Wyoming. I teach state senators and representatives and economic development and university folks about mining, because once they get it, it's like a light bulb moment. But you also do a little research about them before you meet them. Like, what issues do they care about? Do they care about energy, economic development, minerals, whatever their thing is? you can speak to that. And telling stories, we remember stories 22 times more than facts alone. So like what Mag said, like tell the story, because that's all politicians do. They always start with a story, they end with a story, in the middle it's a story, story. So like give them those stories, like feed them those stories, incept them basically. And with that, I would love to hear, so we've been working quite a bit at the national level, and would love to talk about some of the initiatives going on there. And then just like as we work through this, the way that I see, the two parties, it's kind of like psychologically and how to communicate with them. Like Republicans are more like fatherly, protective security, right? And Democrats are more like motherly, nurturing. So there's literally two different languages. And it's really important to try to speak to that language, because they just won't understand it on either side. If you're speaking in a motherly, nurturing way to a Republican, they're like, well, you're not speaking my language. So, it's just a barrier. So it's also learning to be able to translate ourselves as well. Alex?
Yeah, the love languages is important when you're trying to understand how you're talking to people. The federal level is interesting right now. Biden issued the executive order to conduct the study on crypto energy usage. It was sourced out to the OSTP, White House Office of Security Technology Policy, headed by a guy coming out of, I believe, Carnegie Mellon. I think he's a engineer of some sort, Kostas Samaras. Very thoughtful individual. Point of all of this is, interestingly, the White House is thinking about this in very intellectually honest ways, asking the right questions. We've had several engagements with OSTP where they are, Costa's kind of a nerd and he loves power systems. And so if you start him talking about all of the potential for energy optimization that Bitcoin brings, monetization of renewables, making battery storage projects actually pencil in an economic model, potentially. All of the flare mitigation, methane mitigation, landfill, thermal demanufacturing of tires, which everyone look up PRTI Inc., please, and tell that story as well. They're thinking about it, and their eyes are lighting up, and they're going, oh my God, wow, really, this is a load balancing, this is an energy sink. And so that's bullish, right? Manchin's, revision of, it was the climate whatever policy, but it's now the Inflation Reduction Bill, and he explicitly states we don't want to decommission reliable baseload. So people are watching what's happening around the world. At the federal level right now, there's hope. There's a lot of challenges I'm sure we'll talk about, but I'm actually pretty excited about what's going on at the federal level.
And I just want to piggyback on something that Justin mentioned, which is also at the federal level. So as Alex mentioned, we had joined some White House meetings after the executive order went out. But has anyone heard of a RFI? So they're basically, the federal agencies put out these RFIs, or requests for information on specific subjects. So one of the main reasons we engaged with OSTP is because they actually put out an RFI on energy usage, right? It was we want public comment from as many diverse individuals, companies, industries to tell us what we're either doing right, what we're doing wrong, what can be better. And so from Bitcoin Today Coalition, we actually submitted an RFI on behalf of our members. And then we followed up to have some more in-depth conversations about how we thought the White House and OSTP could make better legislation. The Department of Energy also submitted an RFI. Do you remember, Amanda, what it specifically was on? But we also submitted an RFI there. And so this is the part where being engaged with what's going on in Washington directly affects you. They're asking for our input, and other people on the other side, whether it's ESG narratives, they're submitting RFIs and they're having conversations. And if we don't get involved, we don't officially submit these, we don't get a seat at the table, they're going to drive the narrative a way that might be harmful for us and Bitcoin.
And one more thing, just to jump in on, kind of give you an update of some of the stuff that's going on the federal level that you should be aware of and that you should be trying to support. A couple of those are the provisions inside of the Lummis-Gillibrand bill. One in particular that I really like is going to be trying to fix the problem of the illegal taxation on Bitcoin miners. Bitcoin miners have been illegally taxed by the IRS since 2014. There was no proper ruling. It was essentially just added to the FAQ page, and no one has actually been going to bat to try to change this. So there is a potential for it to be changed through the Lummis bill. And there's also people here on the ground that are fighting to make sure that you as Bitcoin miners can try to recoup some of your funds that you've basically been illegally taxed. So I know there's a group here, Olson Partners in Law. You guys should reach out to them. They are, there's a bunch of them in the audience right now. Go check them out. There's going to be a real unique opportunity right now where you can go back and recoup some of the money potentially. Lots of tax credits opportunities. That's the amazing thing about this industry, right? It is growing and is maturing, and there are all sorts of folks, including insurance companies like Hodling, coming in here to try to protect you and try to go on the offense for you and try to recoup some of this funding, try to protect you with insurance. And it's really incredible to see how much it's matured. And it's awesome to also see that some of these problems might be fixed on the federal level. The other one I'll say is the de minimis. You know, I'm a big supporter of no cap gains on Bitcoin, right? It's property. I think that there shouldn't be any capital gains on it. It's money. And I think that some people kind of get caught up saying like, well, you know, $200 isn't enough. Right? If you're a pro no cap gains person, you want to be more like El Salvador, oh, $200, that's not enough. I think it's important that we kind of fracture the psychological barrier on cap gains. Because when I talk to the average person out there, they're like, oh, that's crazy. That'll never happen, right? Never happen. Never happen in the United States. No way. I don't care if it's $200, if it's $100, if it's $5. I think it's important on a federal level that we do break down the barrier on cap gains. So even if we can get a $1 de minimis, I know that sounds crazy, we can start to say, no, it is possible that we can have zero cap gains on Bitcoin. And I think that we can grow that movement from there.
One other thing that the U.S. has that Canada doesn't yet have is these really strong supporters like Senator Loomis, and they're coming, you know, supporting our industry and strongly advocating for it. And I think that's important. And then identifying at the federal level, state, and local level these champions that we can then work with. And then that also includes within the energy regulators, because for example, you know, Texas is understanding the benefit that miners have towards grid optimization, but just to contrast that, Ontario is actually considering eliminating the ability of miners to completely, you know, to participate in kind of this demand response measure. So if we get these advocates that understand it and ask them perhaps to communicate with other jurisdictions, because a lot of times, you know, we know that the companies that come to us have a certain bias towards their technology and what they're doing. But if you talk to a counterpart in another jurisdiction and they're, you know, advocating for this industry, saying, yes, this industry is in fact helping, that comes off a little bit stronger. So developing those strong relationships with regulators, with, you know, politicians who then advocate for you is, I think, where we want to get to next.
And we just need more of those, right? That's the balance. Is today Senators Loomis and Senator Toomey and Congressman Emmer and Warren. Like there is a growing group of members of Congress that are pro Bitcoin, but it's still small. There's 535 members of Congress, and they're absolutely the minority. It kind of reminds me of like Dennis's shirt, what is it, like the party, like the Bitcoin party? Like there's only a single issue voter. Like at some point that we won't measure the House in terms of like, or the Congress in terms of Republicans or Democrats. So it'll be like pro-Bitcoin or anti-Bitcoin. That's kind of the mindset. And today that mindset, you know, there is a lot of skepticism for Bitcoin and for all cryptocurrency. I mean, right now, during this panel, during our conversation, there is a hearing going on in the Senate Banking Committee, and Sherrod Brown, Senator Sherrod Brown put out a tweet last night, and it's about the crypto markets, not Bitcoin specifically, but he said the crypto market is full of rug pulls and scams, and we're having a hearing to try to protect Americans from all these scams. Like, that's what people think. They think Bitcoin is a scam. They think all of crypto is a scam, and that really is a big part of the challenge that we have. So that's one narrative, and then because of that, people think it's worthless. They're like, Bitcoin, it's like magic internet money. I can't see it. It has no value. So it's not worth any energy going into these systems. We shouldn't be doing that. And that's the mindset. And so now we're starting to see policymakers promote this narrative, and it's more nuanced, but we're seeing it more and more, and we're seeing it at high levels as well of, oh, well, yes, Bitcoin is very energy intensive with proof of work, but that's okay because there's other blockchains out there like proof of stake, and they're more efficient, and we're already starting to see Ethereum migrate to that, and that's going to be the future. So that's also a big piece of the conversation that we're trying to get ahead of you cannot replace proof of work with proof of stake. Like, what happens in proof of stake, the outcome is very different than proof of work, and these are not interchangeable. So that's another piece of the conversation that I think is important. There's a very complex group of stakeholders involved in the policies related to Bitcoin and energy policy. You guys mentioned the Office of Science and Technology Policy. That's an office within the White House. You also have FERC. You also have the Department of Energy. You also have the EPA. You have multiple committees of jurisdiction on Capitol Hill. So we're talking about literally hundreds of people we have to engage and educate in order to really have a handle on the policies related to Bitcoin mining. And that is more than a full-time job for everybody on this panel, plus an army of people.
I'll talk to that maybe from a different angle. The dirty little secret in public policy is that the onus of providing facts, science, things like that the burden falls on industry. We have an adversary in the ESG lobby. I'm not talking about people who are supportive of the environment. I'm talking about a small segment that are paid a lot of money to promote a false narrative about our industry. And one of the applicable things that I would hope that people could take away today is to know your enemy. This is something we have learned. Do not delude yourself into thinking that the ESG lobby is some sort of reasonable actor. They are not. They are fundamentally unwilling to divorce their own subjective morality from an objective reality. And as a result of that, we have to not only come to the table with science and education and facts, but we also have to, and here's another takeaway, we have to start developing the ability to assemble. Because the other side is well-oiled, they are long established, and they can put people and feet on the ground. And we need to be able to, as another movement in the United States, be able to assemble some people to show up at state houses, to show up for protests or press conferences. And so this needs to be part of our initiatives in the future, because we are not going to make headway against the ESG lobby only with providing education, because they have an emotional response. And so we need to be able to match that to some degree, but staying within the bounds of reason so that we can reach our own community and we can be responsible to ourselves and have our own integrity. So I'd hope those are some things that you can take away today as well.
Yes, 100% to everything that he said. Go ahead, Justin.
Is there? Okay.
Okay.
So I was just going to say, well put, and maybe there's even an opportunity here for somewhat of a jujitsu move to use their well-oiled machine against them. And this is federal level all the way down to the local level. Look at existing policies and existing targets that your governor or or FERC or other entities have in terms of renewable generation or electric vehicle adoption or new transmission. All these, there's policies all over the place that people are trying to put forward and trying to get them to move, and chances are there's some sticking points. They're not necessarily working out as well as they had hoped, and there could very well be an opportunity that Bitcoin mining fixes this to some degree. And so start to look at these policies that the ESG crowd are probably loud proponents for and say, yeah, I get it, this is what you want, and then boom, here's exactly where, here's where your sticking points are, and then here's where our industry can work to alleviate it, and here's how. And just, they still might say, no thank you, but the people that are listening to them and believe in their policies will probably pay attention to these solution-oriented responses, and you're just kind of flipping it right back at them. So.
Real quick, just with the ESG thing, just briefly, I think that there is something important here to be said with regards to trying to find allies in the space. You might be right. We might not ever be able to convince the very niche small group of ESG lobbyists, but I think there is a real potential to get those that are concerned about the environment, those that are concerned about decarbonizing the grid, and those that are concerned about building out renewables to be on our side. I would much rather fight alongside people who are entrenched in such a fashion that they're never going to be moved than fight against them. And so what we need to be doing is trying to find ways as much as possible to communicate with folks that care about the environment, that care about decarbonization and electrification, because we want those people on our team. We are a small industry. We need to remember that. But we have the potential to grow dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years if we're willing to put our hand out and put the olive branch out and have these conversations. We might not agree on everything, but we can agree that Bitcoin mining does incentivize renewables. It does help with grid stability. It will help us transition to the energy future that a lot of folks want. Some people might not care, right? But we shouldn't be fighting against those people. We should be finding every opportunity to align with them, because at the end of the day, the big boss isn't here yet. We might feel like this is a big boss, the environmental people, like, oh my gosh, like they always win, right? Well, I would really hope to get the people that always win on my side. The big boss is control. Because you can fight the energy FUD. You can say, actually, Bitcoin mining is good for the environment. Landfill, methane capture, methane mitigation. Actually, it's good for grid stability. But you can never say that Bitcoin mining is going to allow you to still control people, right? Bitcoin mining fundamentally breaks down the control that has been built up by the current financial system that we've all lived under for the last 100 years. It fundamentally shifts us. And you can't walk up to someone who is a control hawk, right? Who thinks that we need to spy on everything and control every transaction and say, you know what, actually Bitcoin still lets you have control. It doesn't. So I want to get the environmental people on our side so that we can unite forces with them and go fight the people that are worried about control.
And we have the data to do that. This is why it's important that we are organizing. Collective action is very powerful. We do want to show people that are opponents of us out of misunderstanding that we can actually help to optimize their assets and in many ways monetize those assets in ways that are impossible to do now. And we have the data to show that. It's theoretically possible. We can build models to show. We're now actually testing these technologies that are doing this. We're testing tire thermal demanufacturing. We are testing grid balancing, frequency regulation, different types of demand response. We are putting Bitcoin mining up against economic models, battery storage, that don't pencil otherwise, and they all of a sudden can be economically viable and they can add value to the grid as well. What we need to do is we need to provide that data. That's why the RFI process is so important. That's why the organizations up here that are kind of the connective tissue to policymakers are so important. And what we need from miners is the raw data. We need the telemetry data. We need the financial markets data. We need the amount of hours that you've curtailed. We need your ramp rates. We need all of this, the technical specificity to make sure that we are winning on the logic and data and fact side of the house. And then we can also start to build and co-opt this narrative, because to your point, we're not fighting against rational actors, we are fighting against ideological actors, and that requires not just data, but also a narrative to support to enable popular support to force legislators and policymakers to make these decisions.
And just to further add to that, so when I worked on public policy, I only had the data that my industry, for example, steel, cement, would give to me, and that would be economic data, how many staff are working in the industry, greenhouse gas data, typically that's reported up. And so it's so important for industry to come together, and I get it, there's competitiveness issues, but there's ways to kind of mitigate the competitive data by sending it to a third party or sending it directly to government. But having that data is so critical to making policy that's actually based on good data, right? And reality. And that's the only way. And then also once government has that data, like BC Hydro is actually saying Bitcoin mining is reducing greenhouse gas emissions for district heating in this for the city of Vancouver. They're actually saying how many GHGs are being reduced through fuel switching because the miner takes electricity that's renewable, replaces fossil fuel heating. And so having the government actually say this GHGs are being reduced is, people believe that way more than just an industry person saying, oh, I did a study, right? And that's why we need to send that data in.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And so we're going to transition, we only have about 10 minutes left, to more like geopolitical. And I think it's actually pretty interesting around the ESG initiative. I think it kind of pulls us in. We're seeing, what happened in Germany. Maybe they built out, or they decided to move to wind, solar too quickly. Then they shut down a nuclear plant, and now they're beholden to Russia, right? And Russia's just taken it to them with the cost of gas, and that's impacting the entire world right now. Henry Hub, I think, is around 9.4, which is like record, right? And we've never seen anything like this. And so how can we expect to go back down to even 5, which was unheard of not a year ago. So I would really love, I know a lot of us are international. Did anyone here fly in from another country? Yeah, okay. So yeah, this will be kind of for us. So would love to dig into that aspect. I think Kyle has a lot to say on that, Jayson, and Alex as well. Mags, thanks for bringing us to Canada.
I think it's a really important topic, and it gets geopolitically. I think it boils down to energy independence. Unfortunately, when we were talking about the ESG lobby before, they've managed to create a narrative whereby we continually limit our own ability to produce energy based on their emotional analysis of the situation, and at the same time reach out to places that are, counter to our values in order to supplement the energy we just cut. So we cut our energy here, and everybody knows this, and then we reach out to Saudi Arabia or Venezuela, what have you. And so this ESG narrative is fundamentally changing the way the balance of power throughout the world. And so you see this economic powerhouse that was Germany, as Amanda mentioned, become completely beholden to the whims of Vladimir Putin, simply based on an ESG narrative that is fundamentally flawed. And so I think part of our responsibility as an industry is to start to show that, Bitcoin mining is a way of not only incentivizing a green transition, as they're calling it now, over a very long period of time, but also to just make our energy production stronger here for our long-term national security. And I think there's a lot of people on this panel that can talk to, what energy means for national security. It's such an important aspect of it, and it's certainly been a driver of most of our international engagement and actions, over the past half century.
Go ahead, Megs.
So I think, we're always coming at it from the ESG side, but the energy security side is so top of mind. And if you look at specifically Europe, like they don't have oil reserves, but what they do have is energy that we haven't yet started using as a wide scale. Like if you look at tires, for example, there's 300 million tires in the US, 1 billion tires thrown out every year that can be mined for energy. And yes, it could be applied to Bitcoin mining. But the fact is that Bitcoin mining is subsidizing the building of this infrastructure. Landfill gas capture, it can subsidize, but you don't have to use that whole landfill gas or all those tires for mining. It can be sent to other use cases. And I think that's, a place like Europe, which shut down their nukes, and building nuclear plants takes a long time. Not sure. Also, Bitcoin mining is subsidizing some nuclear cool pilots within the US, but, I digress. The whole point is that typically we look at ratepayers and taxpayers to support the energy system. We have a third pocket now, Bitcoin mining, which is it's money. Like we're mining money, minting money, and that money is either supporting R&D or it's supporting the actual infrastructure build that sometimes can be challenging for government to say, okay, we're going to spend $1 billion on this. So I think that's the energy security side is this whole story that we need to start telling too.
Yeah, yes, Bitcoin mining is going to be able to monetize new generations, so we can just increase the gross amount of energy that we produce. That has knock-on effects for geopolitical implications. So when we think of the geopolitical implications of a decision to basically reduce, I think it was 17 plants, so it was a nuclear fleet. Germany decided to reduce that to 0 by December 2022. And what that has done is that has put in jeopardy the sovereignty of Germany, the political integrity of the European Union, one of the largest kind of shared nascent political projects of the post-Cold War era, potentially NATO. Like there are knock-on effects of being so beholden to an adversarial power for the fundamental ability to create energy that the ramifications, you really can't overstate them. Now, am I saying Germany is going to collapse and the EU is going to collapse and NATO is going to cease to be a thing next year? No, I'm not. But the fact that Germany put themselves in this position, and by the way, while doing so, drastically increased the emissions intensity of their grid system by recommissioning coal plants, is an astonishing own goal. And it's an astonishing old goal that has a significant amount of geopolitical risk tied to it. To go back to Bitcoin producing energy, Bitcoin allows us to produce energy in abundance. If we think that we have to 4x our energy production over the next 50 years to meet global demand and decarbonize, we need something that's going to pay for that. Thermal demanufacturing, incredibly expensive right now. Can you make it modular and scale it? We'll see. But Bitcoin has, this is the nexus between Bitcoin, energy production, and geopolitical security and stability.
I'll throw one little thing in here just to kind of cap it out. No matter where you live, it doesn't matter if you're in the U.S., if you're in North America, if you're outside of this country, I cannot encourage you more to get involved with folks on the ground that it can impact policy. If you really, really hate talking to politicians, send them our way. We'll have those conversations. The other big thing that you can do is keep building, right? Because outside of just having relationships and conversations with elected officials, one of the number one drivers to impact policy is to build a business. And what I mean by that is, I'll take an example, right? So at the Whinstone facility, everybody knows the Whinstone facility, right? It's one of the largest mining operations in North America in Texas. I recently got reached out to by a member of Congress, right? And he has the Whinstone facility in his district. After it was built there, he became very interested, and his team became very interested in learning more and moving forward on the issue. After a little bit of time, that elected official now is one of the most pro-Bitcoin mining people on the planet. He's traveling around the United States and the world talking about how great Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining is. So I cannot encourage you enough to keep building. I know the halving and the difficulty adjustment will encourage you enough to find ways to innovate, but keep innovating and keep building, because those innovations and those businesses that you are building have a direct impact on elected officials all over the world and how they approach this space.
I just wanted to kind of go ahead, Perianne.
All right, one more thought. So Bitcoin is going to be the monetary base layer of the world. It's replacing gold. It's going to replace the role that gold played in economies for literally thousands of years. Right now in the fiat world, this is less than 100-year-old experiment. It's going to fail. What's going to emerge is the Bitcoin standard. So if we just accept that as truth, that's what's coming. That means it is in the United States national security to have Bitcoin mined on U.S. soil.
Yes.
Today, and the White House understands this. President Biden's executive order talks about the tens of millions of Americans that already own cryptocurrencies today, predominantly Bitcoin. It's also in the United States' interest to ensure that all of those Americans that are holding Bitcoin have laws in place that protect them in the future. So with that in mind, that's where we're going. That is the future. We're just on a really bumpy ride to get there, but the future is very, very bright.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's one thing, right? Like grew up here, my family's here. I don't want to have to move to another country because of this, right? So if we don't say and step up now, like who knows where things will be in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years. I think things are moving a lot faster than we all realize, and there is a big tie. A lot of people are very worried about the macroeconomic and energy conditions, and that includes a state representative in Wyoming that's a rancher. You start talking to them about China banning Bitcoin, and they get it immediately, right? And so I think are banning mining. And so you just like really, as we go through this, really try to understand your audience and what their issues are and what they care about. And I think using those different languages especially, right? So like more, security, like fatherly for Republicans and more kind of soft nurturing for Democrats and financial inclusion, like those it actually works. And we've been experimenting with this for over a year now and have made a lot of progress. I would also say please support those that are putting their neck out there, like Senator Lummis and Senator Gillibrand. They are doing so much work behind the scenes, like bipartisan work. It is not easy. It's very hard. Like the risks that they're taking with their careers and reputations, like it's pretty impressive that they're going to bat for us. So I think please be, supportive of those that are being helpful to us as well.
I just wanted to add one takeaway that we've had from, working with a lot of the left side of the political aisle in New York. I would recommend when you're engaging in public policy with officials, ask yourself what will they be able to actually understand from this 20-minute meeting or 30-minute meeting? And then 2, what will they be able to communicate back to their constituents to justify being on your side? And so in the long term, it's super important to educate on the benefits of energy and all of these things. But I just want to reiterate some of the points from before that, the more time we spend talking about energy, we're spending on the opposite team side of the field. And it's important to make those arguments a lot of the time, but we can't spend all of our time there. And so we need to focus on the things that policymakers can hear, and then they can communicate back to their constituents. And that's just like Dennis said, that's building, that's jobs, right? That is financial inclusion for all sorts of diverse communities. I mean, diverse communities are, double-digit percentage growth in terms of investing in Bitcoin than the majority population in the US. So stressing those points, especially to Dems, can really get through. And if you're lucky, maybe they are a wonk and are willing to get into stranded energy and all those sorts of things. But in general, I'd say stick to the things that they can understand and communicate back to their constituents. And that tends to be, jobs, financial inclusion, and most importantly on the security topic, it is the securing the network. 46 million Americans across the country invest in this technology, and they deserve the same security in their network as Wall Street uses with its firewalls and every government agency uses to secure their data and money. So we need to stress that this is security for individual Americans' investments and generational wealth building.
Innovate, educate, and iterate. Just do what you're doing, build what you're building, tell people about it, and then keep doing that. And that's how we win.
Yeah, and I think we keep getting some time up here. So if anyone has questions, it would be nice to hear. Yep, so Bitcoin Today Coalition, Satoshi Action Fund, and Digital Chamber of Commerce. And then
Chamber
there's also
of Digital Commerce.
There we go. Sorry.
Chamber of Digital
There we go.
And
Commerce.
I'll just
Dyslexic.
add within the Bitcoin Today Coalition, BTC Vets.
So if there are any veterans, are there any veterans here or first responders? So we have a Telegram group. We'd love to, maybe you can meet us over there and we can add you to it. And we're starting to work on some of these things together.
Just to jump in, I think the question also was like kind of like what our focus is. And so Satoshi Action Fund is a nonprofit that is focused on advocating for Bitcoin miners. So we are educating policymakers, regulators, public service commissioners, thankfully more effectively with Justin on our team, and Mags as well. And then from there, after we educate them, we are crafting model policy to give to them and say, hey, this is what you should pass. The craziest part about all this is, you hear a lot about bans everywhere, but there's also quite a few individuals, states, advocacy organizations, regions that are very interested in advancing Bitcoin mining. They don't care about all the negative stuff. You say jobs, investment, infrastructure, grid reliability, renewables, they're like, tell me what bill to pass. They're ready to go. And so that's kind of where we are. We're at this nexus of where on the state level, we have over 10 to 15 states we're in conversations with, 3 to 4 states we're in deep conversations with, and we're looking to build more relationships as well, as I said, into Canada as we launch our C3 effort into and become a national, I would say international organization.
So sorry, Dennis, we have to wrap it up. I just got
Okay.
this. So sorry, we have to wrap up questions, but you're welcome to, especially, we'd love to talk to folks that are interested on the side of the stage. And thank you again, Print Crypto, for
Thank you so
sponsoring
much.
this panel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.